The story begins in the small coastal town of Seabrook, a quaint village known for its fishing industry and serene beaches. The townsfolk are preparing for the annual Seabrook Festival, a celebration of the sea and its bounty. The protagonist, Elliot Grayson, is a marine biologist who has returned to his hometown after years of working in the city. Elliot is haunted by the recent loss of his father, a fisherman who disappeared at sea during a violent storm. Elliot spends his days researching marine life and his nights drinking at the local tavern, trying to drown his sorrows. The townsfolk whisper about the curse of the sea, a superstition that claims the ocean takes a life every 7 years. Elliot dismisses these tales as nonsense, but the recent discovery of a strange, barnacle-encrusted object washed ashore begins to unsettle him. One morning, Elliot is called to the beach by a frantic fisherman who claims to have found something unnatural. Elliot arrives to find a massive, white, horse-like creature lying on the sand, its body covered in millions of barnacles and parasites. The creature is barely alive, its breath shallow and labored. The townsfolk gather around, murmuring in fear and awe. Some believe it to be a sign from the sea gods, while others think it's a harbinger of doom. Elliot, driven by both scientific curiosity and a deep sense of empathy, decides to save the creature. He contacts his former colleague, Dr. Lena Marquez, a renowned marine veterinarian, and together they assemble a rescue team. The team includes Captain Jack Morrow, a grizzled fisherman with a mysterious past, and Mia Torres, a young and ambitious marine biologist. The rescue team works tirelessly to free the creature from the barnacles and parasites that cling to its body. The process is grueling and dangerous, as the parasites seem to react aggressively to being removed. One of the team members, Tommy, is bitten by a particularly large parasite and falls ill, his skin turning pale and his eyes glazing over. The team is forced to quarantine him, adding to the growing tension. As night falls, the creature begins to emit a low, mournful sound that echoes across the beach. The townsfolk grow increasingly uneasy, and some begin to demand that the creature be killed before it brings disaster upon them. Elliot, however, is determined to save it, convinced that the creature is not a monster but a victim of some unknown force. As the team continues their work, a violent storm rolls in, cutting off communication with the outside world. The storm is unlike anything the town has ever seen, with waves that crash against the shore like the fists of an angry god. The creature's cries grow louder, and the parasites seem to multiply, spreading across the beach like a living carpet. Elliot and Lena discover that the creature is not a horse but a rare species of marine mammal, one that has been mutated by pollution and climate change. The barnacles and parasites are a symptom of its suffering, a physical manifestation of the ocean's pain. Elliot realizes that saving the creature is not just about rescuing an animal, it's about healing the sea itself. As the storm rages on, the team faces a critical decision: continue the rescue operation or abandon the creature to its fate. Elliot argues passionately for the former, but the others are divided. Captain Jack, who has seen his share of horrors at sea, warns that the creature may be beyond saving. Mia, however, sides with Elliot, driven by her belief in the importance of their work. In a moment of desperation, Elliot makes a breakthrough. He discovers that the parasites are sensitive to a specific frequency of sound, one that can be generated using the equipment on their research vessel. The team works together to create a sonic barrier, driving the parasites away from the creature and allowing them to continue the rescue. As the first act comes to a close, the team manages to free the creature from the worst of the barnacles, but the storm shows no signs of abating. The creature's fate, and the fate of the town, hangs in the balance. The makeshift medical tent reeked of antiseptic and decay. Tommy lay on the cot, his skin pale and clammy, veins bulging like dark roots beneath the surface. His breathing was shallow, and his eyes, once bright and full of life, were now clouded, glazed over, with an unnatural sheen. The bite on his forearm, where the parasite had latched onto him, had swollen into a grotesque, pulsating mass. Thin, black tendrils snaked outward from the wound, spreading like ink in water. His fever's spiking, Lena muttered, pressing a cold compress to Tommy's forehead. Her hands trembled as she checked his vitals. This isn't normal. It's like his body is rejecting itself. Elliot stood by the entrance, his arms crossed, his jaw clenched. He couldn't shake the image of the parasite, its jagged, needle-like teeth sinking into Tommy's flesh, its body writhing as it burrowed deeper. The creature outside wasn't the only victim. The parasites were a plague, and Tommy was their newest host. "We need to contain this," Elliot said, his voice low. "If those things spread—" He didn't finish the sentence. The sound of Tommy's guttural moan filled the tent, followed by a wet, choking cough. Blood splattered the sheets, dark and viscous. Lena stepped back, her face pale. "Elliot," she whispered, "this isn't just an infection. It's changing him." Outside, the storm howled, and the barnacled beast's mournful cry echoed through the night. The curse had begun. The research vessel pitched violently as waves crashed over the bow, the storm raging with unrelenting fury. Elliot gripped the railing, his knuckles white, as he stared into the churning black waters. The underwater trench loomed beneath them, a gaping maw that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. The sonar screen flickered, displaying jagged, unnatural formations deep below, structures that shouldn't exist. "This is it," Lena said, her voice barely audible over the wind. She clutched a tablet displaying data from the deep sea probe. "The readings are off the charts. There's something down there. Something alive." Elliot's mind raced. The barnacled beast, the parasites, Tommy's transformation, it all pointed to this place. The trench was no ordinary geological feature. It was a prison, a tomb for something ancient and terrible. The probe's camera feed flickered, revealing glimpses of grotesque, bioluminescent creatures skittering along the trench walls. And then, for a brief moment, the screen showed something else. A massive, shadowy shape, its form shifting and writhing as if it were watching them. "We need to go deeper," Elliot said, his voice steady despite the dread coiling in his gut. "Whatever's down there, it's connected to the beast. We have to stop it." Lena nodded, but her eyes betrayed her fear. The storm above was nothing compared to the abyss below, and the abyss was waking up. The submersible creaked under the crushing pressure of the deep, its lights barely piercing the oppressive darkness. Elliot and Captain Jack sat in tense silence, the weight of the abyss pressing down on them both. The shadowy shape from the sonar had grown clearer, a colossal, writhing mass of tendrils and eyes, pulsating with an otherworldly glow. It was the source of the parasites, the heart of the curse. "We're not gonna make it back, are we?" Jack said, his voice gruff but calm. He adjusted the controls, guiding the submersible closer to the entity. Elliot hesitated. "We have to try. If we can plant the charges." "Kid," Jack interrupted, his eyes locking onto Elliot's. "You've got a life ahead of you." Lena Mia, the town. They need you. I'm just an old fisherman with too many regrets. Before Elliot could protest, Jack unstrapped himself and grabbed the detonator. I'll take it down there. You get back to the surface. Jack, no. Elliot shouted, but the captain was already opening the hatch. Water surged in, and Jack gave Elliot one last look, a faint smile on his weathered face. Tell him I went out like a hero, he said, before plunging into the abyss. The last thing Elliot saw was Jack's silhouette, swallowed by the entities. Glowing tendrils, as the charges detonated in a blinding flash. The explosion rocked the trench, sending shock waves through the water. Elliot barely managed to surface the submersible, his hands shaking as he guided it back to the research vessel. The storm above had begun to subside, but the weight of what he had witnessed pressed heavily on his chest. Lena and Mia pulled him aboard, their faces etched with worry. "Where's Jack?" Lena asked, though the look in Elliot's eyes told her everything. "He's gone," Elliot said, his voice hollow. "But he bought us time. The entity, it's not dead, just wounded." As the team regrouped, Lena analyzed the data from the submersible. The entity wasn't just a creature. It was an ancient force, a manifestation of the ocean's pain and corruption. The barnacled beast, the parasites, even Tommy's transformation, they were all symptoms of its influence. The trench was a wound in the earth, and the entity was the infection. "We can't kill it," Lena said, her voice trembling. "But we can weaken it. If we can amplify the frequency that repels the parasites, we might be able to drive it back into the trench, seal it away." Elliot nodded, determination replacing his grief. "Then that's what we'll do. For Jack. For Tommy. For the beast." The revelation was clear. This was no longer just a rescue mission. It was a battle for survival, for the town, for the ocean, and for the soul of the sea itself. The research vessel groaned as another wave slammed into its hull, the storm's fury reigniting with a vengeance. Elliot, Lena, and Mia worked frantically in the lab, their hands flying over equipment as they calibrated the frequency generator. The device was their only hope, a way to amplify the sound that repelled the parasites. And, hopefully, the entity itself. "We're running out of time," Mia shouted, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. The sonar screen flickered, showing the entity rising from the trench, its tendrils stretching toward the surface like the fingers of a drowning giant. Elliot's heart pounded as he connected the final wires. "It's ready. But we need to get closer, right above the trench." Lena gripped the wheel, steering the vessel into the storm's eye. The waves grew monstrous, threatening to capsize them at any moment. As they reached the trench, Elliot activated the device. A low, resonant hum filled the air, growing louder and more piercing. The water below churned violently as the entity recoiled, its tendrils thrashing in agony. "It's working!" Mia cried. But the entity wasn't defeated yet. A massive wave surged toward them, towering like a wall of doom. "Hold on!" Lena screamed. The vessel pitched violently as the wave hit, sending them spiraling toward the trench's edge. The escape had begun, but the cost was far from paid. The third act brings the story to its climax. The team returns to Seabrook, where they must confront the entity's influence head-on. Elliot, Lena, and Mia work together to create a device that can generate the frequency needed to destroy the entity, but they must first protect the barnacled beast from the townsfolk, who have been driven to madness by the entity's influence. A fierce battle ensues, with the team fighting both the townsfolk and the parasites. Elliot is forced to confront his own fears and guilt, realizing that his father's death was not an accident but part of the entity's plan. He finds the strength to fight on, driven by the memory of his father and the hope of a better future. In a final, desperate act, Elliot uses the device to destroy the entity, but at great personal cost. The storm subsides, and the barnacled beast is finally free, its body cleansed of the parasites. The town begins to heal, but Elliot's fate is left uncertain. The story concludes with the town rebuilding and the team reflecting on their journey. Mia takes over Elliot's research, determined to continue his work, while Lena returns to the city, forever changed by her experience. The barnacled beast swims free, a symbol of the oceans, resilience and the power of hope. In the final chapter, the townsfolk gather to honor Elliot's sacrifice, and the barnacled beast is seen one last time, swimming gracefully in the distance. The story ends on a note of bittersweet hope, with the understanding that the sea, like life, is both beautiful and dangerous, and that it is up to humanity to protect it.